it's time to get started with what you have really come here for. I would love to introduce you to today's presenters. Both are fantastic MSP sales engineers here at Nerdio. Take it away, Marcos Ortega and Jordan Wazwaz.
Thank you for the fabulous introduction, Ashley. And thank you for joining us, everybody, and thank you for your time today. We're here to talk about managing endpoints with Microsoft and versus Nerdio and traditional MSP tools. So just want to high level talk about the agenda. First thing, and some of the things we're going to talk about is just the role and evolution of endpoint management. Where we started as MSPs with managing endpoint devices and kind of where we're at today. Then moving into traditional versus modern endpoint management, we're going to do a little bit of an intro on what is Microsoft Intune, what is Microsoft Defender for endpoint, and then how does that run and pair well with Nerdio. And then again, kind of capping it off with a traditional versus Microsoft and Nerdio comparison. And then again, finally finishing with endpoint management demo, as well as a Q&A session with myself and Marcus. So moving right along, the first thing we want to talk about, of course, is what is the role of endpoint management? For an MSP, it's providing that centralized, efficient, and secure way to manage all of our endpoint and end user devices. This includes corporate-owned, BYOD, mobile devices like phones and tablets that span a wide array of operating systems. And as we look at the timeline of where we came and the evolution of endpoint management as MSPs, in the pre-2000s, in the early days of IT, endpoint management was rudimentary, mostly manual, and often limited to individual device configuration. The tools were pretty basic. We're focusing on singular tasks like antivirus protection or software installation without central management. Most, if not all, devices are company-owned and stayed within the company's private and internal network. And generally at that point in time, if you had a company with multiple sites, you're managing each site almost as an individual component. There's no hub and spoke. Nothing's really managed together as a centralized network. As we move along then, as networks are growing, the need for centralized management has become clear and is becoming clear. Solutions like Active Directory, Group Policy, SCCM, or System Center Configuration Manager are starting to allow IT teams to manage devices and configurations, deploy software, deploy updates and patches from that centralized patch management location. Now we're starting to see the introduction of cell phones, BYOD devices. That's when Exchange Active Sync, some of those early MDM tools are starting to come into play here. We're starting to have the ability to manage end user devices, whether they're corporate owned or not, wipe those directories or wipe those disks on a device if needed. Starting to blur those lines, right, between kind of PCs, mobile devices, and then so with the modern advent of UEM and where we're at today, the unified endpoint management consoles are starting to emerge. This is that holistic management across all of your endpoint types, all of your endpoint devices from that cloud console. And again, that's kind of moving from even just that RMM portal in the mid-2010s to now kind of that Microsoft Intune cloud portal where, again, whether it's an Azure Virtual Desktop or server machine, if it's iOS, Mac OS, you really have that cloud-based management of all of your endpoints.
So I'll go ahead and pick it up and start talking about some of the traditional endpoint management tools that are commonly used. So the first one is an RMM tool. RMMs allow MSPs to monitor device health and perform remote administration of devices at a larger scale. The next thing I want to highlight is group policy. So group policy is built on top of Active Directory, which allowed administrators to apply standardization configurations and settings to Active Directory users and computers. The next thing I want to highlight is Active Directory itself, right? So Active Directory offers centralized identity and the ability to group users and devices. And the final thing I want to talk about when I'm talking about these traditional tools is security. So security is a hot button topic, right? So endpoint detection and response, or EDR, patch management, device encryption, etc. So you have to keep things in mind like how reliable is your RMM's patching? How easy is it to build out patching stages in that RMM tool? And what happens when you want to migrate to a new RMM tool? What do you do? And is this tool easy to use and is it scalable? Those are all things you have to keep in mind as an MSP. So here are some common challenges that you are faced with those traditional tools. So the first thing, oh my goodness, so time consuming, right? So you have to set up and configure it, and that has to be replicated for each and every client. So there may be a need to develop scripting to automate some tasks, so you're not having to do that manual work. The next thing is it's not cost effective. So you might have to use multiple solutions or agents to get your desired desired results. So that means you're spending lots of time, lots of labor hours are spent learning brand new tool sets, having to manually develop those automations and the manual setup of each and every customer. The next thing I want to highlight is the steep learning curve. So depending on the number of solutions you have, there may be a lot of training that you need to provide for your team or yourself to get everybody up to speed. And if you just so happen to switch tools, now your staff needs to be trained on a whole new tool to use, right? And the next thing is security issues. Once again, is that RMM patching correctly? How easy is it to build out a security update process? Are there any agent vulnerabilities that you see and run into? Those are all things you have to ask yourself and deal with when dealing with these traditional tools that I highlighted.
So that brings us to what is Microsoft Intune? And really, before I even get into what is Microsoft Intune, I just have a super easy and quick poll question that I have for the group, and that's just, are you currently using Microsoft Intune today? So I'm just going to give 20, 30 seconds here for everybody to go ahead and answer this poll for us. And I'm watching some of the answers come in. We got about half of the answers submitted. I'm going to give it another 15, 20 seconds or so. Give everybody a chance to get all of their answers submitted. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go forward. And as you can see here, about 70% of the group is already using Microsoft Intune today. And we have about 30% that aren't currently using it. And my guess is the 30% that aren't using it, you have an interest there. That's why you're on this webinar today, to kind of learn about what the difference is between Microsoft Intune and those traditional tools. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you have a much better understanding of what those are, and maybe feel those barriers of entry have been lifted because of that understanding. So I'm going to move on here and give a bit of an explanation on then what is Microsoft Intune. You've maybe even heard of or using AVD today, but how many people are using Intune? As we can see, about 70% of the group, 30% aren't. And chances are the folks that aren't using it today is because it's one more thing that they have to learn, another thing they have to add to the stack, build out a subject matter expert on, and then kind of deal with the things that come after the fact, right? Managing those policies and all of those things. So, going to give you a little backstory on why you should leverage it again if you haven't already. But Microsoft Intune is a cloud-based tool that helps organizations manage corporate and BYOD workstations, mobile devices, and mobile applications that are used to access corporate data and the 365 stack. It simplifies the management of these applications and devices, both mobile, desktop, and virtual endpoints. And by adding Intune to your service offering, MSPs can better serve clients, strengthen their business relationships, and be a trusted partner in managing modern IT environments. Intune really offers device and app management across all platforms, ensuring that data security and policy compliance is met, again, whether it's BYOD, corporate-owned, iOS, macOS, or Windows devices. Now, on this graphic, what you're seeing here up at the top, these green devices, these are going to be company managed and owned. You have the yellow, which are employee managed and owned. And then you might even have third-party devices where, another IT team is actually the corporate owner of that device. But with Microsoft Intune, we can still have BYOD control and push various tasks or push various configuration policies, have various levels of control over these devices, depending on the state, whether it's employee managed, third party, and whether we're doing device management or app management. And then at the bottom, some of the things that we can do with device management and app management are listed. So, enrolling those devices, provisioning settings and certificates, removing corporate data. On the app side of things, being able to push those apps, configure those applications and push updates. And, all sorts of different components that come along, again, with that device and app management suite. Some of the benefits then, to break them down further, is going to be the efficient customer management piece. So with Microsoft Intune, managing a customer becomes seamless due to the service's capacity for rapid implementation across multiple devices. You have accessible licensing. Microsoft Intune is included in Business Premium, Windows E3, E5. There's a good chance that for those of you who aren't using Intune today, you're already selling a license to your customer that includes those Intune entitlements. So it's something that you can already use to bolster, again, your service offering at likely no additional cost to the customer. Now, it helps facilitate scaling because as MSPs scale to new customers, Microsoft Intune offers significant benefits with features that support this growth. And then lastly, with the ease of deployment, I'm thinking things like autopilot here. Intune supports modern device deployment strategies with the ability for you to scale very quickly and deploy machines to computers, again, without maybe even needing hands-on keyboard for your technicians. Now, this next slide then brings us to some of the kind of native pitfalls of Microsoft Intune. Now, Microsoft Intune is great and effective, but again, does have some kind of native pitfalls when MSPs go to utilize this functionality. So it's really built for an enterprise organization, and there's not a lot of cross-tenant, multi-tenant functionality native within Microsoft Intune. So it's really not built for multi-tenancy. There's no version or policy backups. Unified app management is not easy or efficient, so you're not able to push .exes directly to company machines. They need to go through a file conversion process to something called a .win32 file. And then there's no policy drift or standardization. So if a technician makes a policy, they have to go make it time and time again in customer tenants. If you need to update a policy, you're jumping into each customer tenant to update those policies. So again, multiple pitfalls to the native landscape when it comes to how MSPs need to have that multi-tenant functionality. And really, that's where Nerdio Manager for MSP comes in to kind of bridge that gap and help MSPs get the multi-tenant, cross-tenant functions that they need with that Intune portal.
All right, we're going to try this again, and hopefully you guys can hear my voice. And I'd love to show you my beautiful face, but in trying to keep things flowing, we're going to keep the video off for now. The slides are more important anyway. So next up, what is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, right? So as Jordan did, we'll take a poll here real quick, and I just want to see out of the people that are here today, if you are currently using Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and we'll just hold for about 15, 20 seconds here so people can answer this question. I'm almost betting that the results are going to be skewed in the opposite direction than what we saw on the Intune side, but maybe I'll be surprised. Give it about 10 more seconds. All right, let's check it out. Let's see what the results look like. Okay, no, it's actually still really good. So we've got about 56% of people using Defender for Endpoint right now, about 43% not utilizing it. And so we'll kind of get into, what is it, why you should be leveraging it, and some of those challenges as well. So we talk about what is Microsoft Defender, right? A lot of times, one of the reasons that MSPs aren't really getting into Defender for Endpoint is because, Defender in general is a big umbrella of products, right? So you've got all kinds of things. Defender for identity and cloud apps and Entra ID, data loss prevention, right? Those are a lot of things. And Defender for Endpoint is just one piece of the Defender suite of products. But again, it is a part of that suite. It comes in your business premium license, and it does have, standalone licenses that you can get as well. So why use Defender for Endpoint, right? Versus, the other guys, what you might be using today. Well, first off, it's a really great product and you're paying for it. So, third-party independent tests show that the top 10 EDRs out right now are within, 2/10 of effectiveness from each other. And Gartner has Microsoft in the leader quadrant. So this is not the Defender that we know from the past. It's a really, really great product. It's enterprise grade, protects your devices against ransomware, cybersecurity threats, and has industry-leading Defender technologies. It's cost-effective, right? So we talked about the fact that it's probably already in a bundle that you're selling. A lot of MSPs have kind of standardized on the business premium license SKU, which has Defender for Business baked into it, which has most of the features, if not all the features of Defender for Endpoint Plan 1. And there's a standalone version that you can purchase as well. And it's highly scalable, right? The Defender's it's a cloud-based infrastructure. There's no agent deployment, right? It's built in as a product that you can turn on from a cloud side. And it makes it great for MSPs, gives you scalability and accommodates your growth very easily. So some of those benefits to using Defender for Endpoint, right? And specifically when we talk about doing some of these things with Nerdio built in or with it is a solutions baseline, right? So when you're looking at Defender and Intune natively, well, every time you onboard a new customer, right, you're in this position where you have to go set those tenant level settings each and every time, right? You got to go configure it for customer A, B, C, and that requires a lot of work, right? And maybe ends up with inconsistency, right? Customer A's settings are different from the rest of your customers. Policy management, right? Grouping those policies together, making sure that there's no drift from your baselines, and then also just really the ability to create those policies once and not have to recreate them over and over again, right? I give this example all the time, coming from the MSP side myself, right? You can give technicians the same job to do, and there's going to be some variances between the way they do it, right? It's just the nature of the beast, right? And so using automation really helps eliminate human error. And then UEM integration, right? Defender for Endpoint is part of and highly integrates with Intune, right? So as you onboard devices into Intune, you can have them automatically onboard into Defender as well. But again, the challenge there is when you do that natively, you have to go set that up every time. You have to go turn on that integration. It's not on by default. You got to give Microsoft all the settings that it needs to do. And again, that's work to have to do that across 1, 5, 20 customers, however many people you have in your stack, and then do it the same way every time you onboard. And as you'll see coming up in the demo, that is where bolstering on Nerdio Manager for MSP with Microsoft Defender and Intune is really going to help you guys.
So that brings us to comparing traditional tools versus Microsoft and Nerdio. And really what we're going to do in this section is break down some of those components of traditional tools versus Microsoft and Nerdio and a little bit further. So in this case, talking about traditional RMM versus Microsoft, Intune, and Nerdio. And one of the highlights here is that it's agentless. So, I mean, we can all think of over the last 6 to 12 months, a few different agent-based pieces of shadowing software that have had, large exploits that we've had to deal with. And one of the beautiful pieces of Microsoft Intune, and similar to the Defender piece that Marcus just mentioned, is that there is no agent here. This is an agentless software, all done over 443, over the web and through the cloud. So you're able to kind of remove an attack vector from your stack and just remove one piece from your native portfolio, or non-native portfolio rather. Then you have the ease of use. This comes back to what we mentioned earlier in that you don't have to teach your team that RMM structure. Moving from one RMM to another requires teaching your staff the uplift of policies and scripting, your alerting, all of that from one utility to the next, on top of teaching the technical expertise to the staff members who are going to be working and performing those tasks and living in that utility. The beautiful piece of working natively is that Microsoft tends to, when they change things, it's going to change across your customer base. You're not going to have to migrate. Really keeps that ease of use plain and simple. Then supported device types. I think this might be the biggest piece that, separates traditional RMM from Microsoft Intune. And that's the fact that Microsoft Intune natively supports iOS, Mac OS, server devices, AVD, and really just across the board. It's going to manage all of your devices, regardless of the OS type. Again, it's agnostic. And over the last 2 weeks, they've really come out with a lot of features regarding Mac OS, iOS specifically, that put them in line with a lot of the big MDM out there today that manage those devices. So again, I think this might be the biggest piece to me that separates Microsoft and Nerdio from traditional RMM, is the fact that, again, it's agentless and that you're able to support iOS, Mac OS, all under one hood. Now, as we move into the next section, we're talking about traditional group policy and Active Directory. When we talk about Active Directory versus Microsoft Intune, really what we're talking about is the fact that we're going to be using Entra ID in most cases as kind of the base unified identity here instead of Active Directory. So that inherently is a bit more efficient. And what I mean by that is, say you need to go stand up a new Active Directory server, you're gonna have to spin up the server, do the server role, DC promo, extend the domain. Even if you have a set template of GPO objects, you're going in and you're importing that XML file or whatever it is. With Nerdio and with Microsoft Intune, you have a very quick way of just being able to deploy policies and kind of set things one time without just less manual labor involved. Now, another piece of traditional group policy versus Active Directory is that traditional Active Directory group policy doesn't have much for data loss prevention. Now, data loss prevention is one of the biggest selling factors of Microsoft Intune. Not only can you do mobile device management, but you can deploy multiple layers of data loss prevention, whether that's at the device layer, the mobile application policy layer, and we can start to put all sorts of different things in place, like, hey, you can only use the native Outlook app on your phone. You can only copy and paste from Outlook to Excel, from Excel to PowerPoint, but not from the Office suite into Notepad or other non-Office suite applications. So there's a lot we can do with data loss prevention that really sets Intune apart from group policy in the traditional sense. And then towards the bottom, these two bottom points kind of go hand in hand. When we talk about line of sight, you don't need line of sight to a domain controller anymore, because as we mentioned, Intune is functioning with Entra ID over port 443, no need for a VPN or any private endpoints. So line of sight to a domain controller is just not needed. And one of the biggest reasons I almost see some of our MSP partners moving away from traditional group policy and to Intune is being able to, not have to manage those legacy components of a VPN, a domain controller. And then again, without line of sight, kind of goes that infrastructure needs piece. So because we no longer need line of sight, we likely no longer need the actual hardware that the DC is running on, the patching, all of the DR considerations that might come with that. So again, traditional group policy and Active Directory no longer needs that line of sight to a domain controller, and therefore no longer needs the infrastructure along with it. Now, as we move into traditional security versus Microsoft and Nerdio, last piece I want to cover is just kind of update rings. Traditional RMMs, you're blocking and allowing KBs, very granular, saying, hey, I want this KB or this KB to be patched and this one to not. With update rings, you have your quality updates, your feature updates, and effectively what you're doing is for whatever type of update you have, you're setting the ring and the cadence that you want that to push out to various devices and users. Kind of the theory here is that instead of blocking patches, you're generally going to let anything through on that Microsoft ring. You're going to deal with a bad patch Tuesday, as there are less and less today, and deal with a bad patch Tuesday versus dealing with a bad 0 day rather. It's again not often that I see a bad patch Tuesday anymore, but it's still every day that we hear 0 days reported in the wild. And those patches are really helping us to make sure that we're staying as up to date as possible with various pieces of software. Integration with the Microsoft ecosystem. I think this piece is really huge, and Marcus talked about it a little bit with Defender. The fact that Microsoft Intune and Defender, they both integrate with each other. They go hand in hand in terms of reporting and passing data back and forth. But you can really take this a step further if you consider that Microsoft Defender for Cloud is a free service that many of us are starting to implement today. Azure Sentinel is kind of their SIEM or their log aggregate tool. And you can really start to aggregate all of your logs across your Microsoft ecosystem and pass those through Sentinel into Defender for Cloud and really keep your entire environment clean, logged, and make sure that you're watching for malicious actors and bad things happening across the board. The last piece then is solutions baselines. We again talked about this on the Defender piece a little bit. We also just released on the 14th, I believe, the ability to do this for Intune as well. And I'm sure Marcus will show you a tiny bit of that on the demo. But we have the ability to set Defender and solution baselines for Intune as well. This gives you the option of setting those tenant settings, things like, hey, I need to have two-factor enabled when I enroll an Entra ID device. I need to set up this particular antivirus exclusion policy for this customer when I enroll Defender. But again, you set up your baselines at the tenant level, and you're able to just simply apply that to the customer. But again, we'll show you this in the demo here in a minute. I'm going to kick it over to Marcus to really show you guys what you've likely been waiting for here and show you the proof in the pudding and what Nerdio Manager for MSP can do with endpoints. All right, how's that looking? Looks like it's showing up for me. Perfect. All right, everybody. So what you're looking at, for those who maybe haven't seen it before, this is Nerdio Manager for MSP. What we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and walk you through a little bit here at the top and just show one of the first cool things that we have is called global views. So one of the first things you'll notice is that native inside of Microsoft, like I mentioned, you often don't have the ability to look across, or not often, I shouldn't say, but natively you don't have the ability to look across your customer tenants and look at all of their physical endpoints, for example. Physical endpoints, the backup dashboard here, AVD dashboard. Now, most importantly, though, what we're talking about maybe here in this case, since we're talking about Intune devices, is going to be this device dashboard. Now, you can look and you can see all of your devices. You can also set up that WinHeart, in this case, is one of our test customers. And we set up a test view that shows us all of our WinHeart customers in one view. So if I have all devices here, first thing you're going to notice is that, again, Elite Airplane Services is showing, WinHeart. And what you can do is consider this from a level 1, level 2 perspective. I mean, even engineers, right? Instead of having to browser hop, jump in, incognito windows, finding the computer from the customer's tenant, really what you're able to do here is say, hey, customer, which machine are you on? They say they're on MA Intune 01. You're able to even search that here in the side, MA Intune. You'll see that I can find this machine. And at a quick glance, I can say, hey, is it compliant? Is there configuration profiles with conflicting states? Is it compliant for applications, for updates, for all these different components here? This is going to be evaluating risk if you have Defender enabled. And then what you can do is you can simply even click on that device and it'll launch you directly into that customer so that you can look at this device, manipulate it. And you'll see that once I click on a device, from the drop down on the side, I have a full list of actions available to me that I can take against this machine. These are all the actions that would be available from the Microsoft Intune portal. Now, also from looking at this device, you can see, hey, here are the compliance policies, the configuration profiles. I can very quickly identify that there are configuration profiles with error states on this machine. If I click on this, I can scroll through here. I can sort by device or user scope. I can take a look at which one. And if I look at this, I can say, hey, I can very quickly tell that change default wallpaper has been modified. What's wrong with this? It's the desktop image and lock screen image URL. So now my technicians can easily go in, identify what was wrong with this policy or what's been changed and fix that with the end user, or just by pushing those policies back out to the machine, whatever that may look like there. Then moving down, if I take a look at this machine again, just high level, you have the device name, machine details, whether it's a virtual machine, Microsoft Corporation, etc. Is it Entra joined or registered? This is going to be, corporate versus BYOD devices here. Again, if I hit this properties window now, I have a bunch of information about my endpoint. I can look at the overview. So, just a bunch of GUID, SID information, the version, the join type, owner, bunch of unique identifiers for this machine. We even have more details about, hey, who's the manufacturer? Again, in this case, it's a virtual machine. So we can even see Hyper-V, Microsoft, etc. If this was a Dell box or a HP, we would see that information here. Again, configuration profiles, compliance policies, other profiles. Here's your updates. So you can see that this is the update ring membership for this machine. Here's the current OS build, the quality updates. There are 4 missing. I can look at the applications that have been pushed via Microsoft Intune. We're also looking at the machine to see what's installed. You can look at what scripts are assigned to the machine, to the end user. This machine, unfortunately, is not in Defender, so this is blank. We have the ability to push BitLocker for TPM and non-TPM devices. It stores the Entra ID keys here, and then end users can come in and do the TPM or the BitLocker recovery key reset, rather. Now, moving back to the MSP layer, I'm clicking on that top left corner, moving to this top layer. I mentioned solutions baselines, or we had mentioned solutions baselines. One of the things we have here then is at this MSP layer, if I click on solution baselines here, you can see that we have solution baselines for Defender for Endpoint, as well as solution baselines for Microsoft Intune. If I hit the dropdown and hit configure baseline, this gives the ability, and again, what this is really doing is helping you to really set up, enable, and configure Microsoft Defender at the tenant level for that customer. So Nerdio here, if I go policy management and I look at all of these different things on the side, these are various types of Intune policies, Defender policies, conditional access. But now, for example, if I wanted to deploy an endpoint security policy, before I do that, Defender needs to be enabled for a customer in their tenant. So that's really what you can think of this. This is going to give you the tenant settings to enable Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, do it in a standardized fashion, and do it in an automated fashion across your customer base. So if I come here and again, I click configure baseline, all of these settings and what this is doing is walking you through setting up Defender for Endpoint for a customer tenant, but doing it through Nerdio. And you can see here as you go through, you can allow Defender to manage security configuration. So this is basically passing Defender and Intune, kind of integrating the 2 portals together, enabling device diagnostics, letting Defender evaluate device risk for Windows, iOS, Android. We can set up the device onboarding. We have baseline endpoint security policies, so you can deploy the baseline here, or you can do a custom baseline that you maybe have created. You can assign this to all devices or a custom subset of devices, set up your notifications. And once you've created this baseline, all you're really doing is you're coming in here, you're hitting going quick. You see this assign button. I'm clicking on assign. I'm clicking on add assignments. And now from this add assignments option, I have the ability to add or overwrite, and I can add all customers or a subset of customers to this particular baseline. So if WinHeart, you'll see they're not in this list. If I were to add, hit confirm, within a few minutes, WinHeart is going to have Windows Defender for Endpoint enabled within that tenant, which now gives me the ability to come into Nerdio and start deploying endpoint policies for Windows Defender, attack surface reduction, all those different components here. Now, Marcus, I saw you're back in. I'm not sure if your connection's stable or not. I just know you might have had a smoother demo here. I'm not sure if there's anything that you wanted me to make sure that I hit, or anything you want me to pivot and make sure that I'm showing the group here.
Yeah, I'm assuming you can hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you. And like I said, I can continue along. I just want to make sure. I know you had a specific demo in mind for the group here, so I want to make sure that I'm hitting any of the big components that were important.
Yeah, absolutely. You're doing great. You're on the right track.
All right, right on. Thank you. So let me show you here for solution baselines for Intune, kind of a similar concept here, right? If I hit configure baseline, of course, it knows everybody's watching me, so it wants to go slow. But we got Intune. Of course, again, this is going through some of the basics here. So saying, hey, Intune should be enabled at the customer level. This is really enabling Intune in Nerdio for a customer. Now we're talking about some of the general enrollment components of Intune. So specify which users and groups can join to Microsoft Entra. Is this all or none? Are we requiring MFA to join a device to Microsoft Entra and inherently then Intune? Do we have an Intune device limit? If we do have a device limit, what is that limit? Do we have a device cleanup rate? So if a user joins a device to Intune and it hasn't checked in X amount of days, are we going to remove that device based on its check-in date? And again, checking the box, setting 60 and enforce would simply enable this setting in that tenant for the customer. And then again, if you apply this to multiple customers, you're really keeping this standard across the board. We then have the device compliance section here. We're able to mark devices incompliant if no policy is assigned. Enabling lapse. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar, but what lapse is, this rotates the local admin password on a local machine. This is a super cool feature that I think everybody should really be enabling or utilizing today if you aren't. So something to look into for everybody on the call is a lapse here. You can enable the Windows Update for business reports. You can set your policy baseline. So if you have a set of policies, CIS policy, FINRA policy, HIPAA, whatever it is, automatically just clicking this button, hitting all devices or custom, you're able to assign that baseline out right away here. Again, we have the license check. We're going through and making sure that, hey, if a customer is using a feature in your baseline that requires a certain license, we'll confirm and check that they have it. Various permission checks here, just making sure that everything's going to function when you turn it on. Once you save and close, that same configuration or same concept rather of I hit the assign button, I hit add assignments. And then another thing you'll notice is we have the modes here. You have enforce and report only. My recommendation for everybody is if you have a customer with existing Intune or Defender policies, you're almost always going to want to use this report only functionality. What report only is going to do is kind of what we call a what if, right? And it's going to confirm, hey, what's in place today? What am I going to push? What are going to be the conflicts? And then you can go in and clean up whether it's your policy, their policy, whatever it is. Identify what's there. And once you're ready to go, swap it to enforce. But I just want to show that, if you're ever pushing any of these policies to something that's existing, I generally recommend report only and then enforcing. Now, under policy management then, you're going to notice that there's all these different categories, if you will: conditional access, security baselines, configuration profiles, autopilot, mobile application. Then down at the bottom, here's the Defender pieces for enrollment status, endpoint security. Now, the way that our tool works then is we have a bunch of pre-canned policy that you're going to see: NMM attack, NMM Defender antivirus for Windows 11.10. If I come up to configuration profiles, deploy wallpaper, disable widgets, set OneDrive to a SharePoint location inside of your file explorer. This one is really cool. OneDrive known folder move. We're all probably implementing this today. So the way that this works then is you have the ability to simply take our policies, clone them if needed, give them a new name of MSP, simplify user experience, make any of the settings changes that you might want to make, and then push that out to the end user. And really what that looks like, and I apologize because there's been some changes to the demo, so my normal policy that I use is a little bit different here. Let's see, I think power plan might work. So you'll see here, if I click assign and look at this policy with multiple versions, I can assign a policy to a customer and I can do it in multiple ways. I can do a sync type of manual or automatic. And manual is going to effectively be a one-time push of any one of these policies. Now you'll notice that there's latest, V1, V2. So in this case, I can hard code my customer to look at a particular version. And if I were to even set this to automatic in V1, Nerdio is now looking at this customer in like a desired state configuration. And it's going to be pushing these endpoint settings for this power plan profile out to this customer. And it's always going to be keeping version 1 in sync and letting you know if it drifts. If it drifts, you're able to come in very quickly, just hit a button that fixes that drift for you. Now, alternatively, what you can do is swap this to latest and automatic. And where this is really helpful then is you'll find you often need to come in and change these policies. Now, if you need to change these policies natively, you're going into each one of these tenants one by one, updating the policy to match whatever you need. Now with Nerdio, if you just set these all to automatic and latest, you come in and you update the Marcos power plan profile. That workflow would simply be to come in here. If we scroll all the way to the bottom of each one of these various sections, there's an import button. We would import the Marcos profile here, give it a change log, and it appends a version 3 to that profile. So once it appends version 3, anybody who's looking at the Marcos plan profile or power plan profile here, what's going to happen is, again, they're going to get version 3 pushed out to them automatically if I have it set to automatic and latest. Now, I know we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to show this last piece very quickly, but to take all of this a step further, then you have all these various categories of policy. You're creating your policies, you're having various versions within them, you're setting them to either, one-time pushes or automatic pushes. You can take what's called a policy baseline then and group any number of these policies together. So this can be, maybe 5 conditional access, a security baseline, some compliance policies, some endpoint security, all grouped together to make, in this case, like a PAX 8 baseline policy here. We have a CIS policy, HIPAA policy. And if I come in here and click on this, you'll see there's 20 different policies that make up this baseline. Now, what's awesome here then is if I click on this, you'll also see that within the policy, you can bake in that sync type in the version. So you can hard code, you can do one-time pushes. Now, where this can help you build out your MSP service offering then, is you're able to simply build out what you want to be your MSP standard, your industry standard, whatever that might be. You come in here, you click the assign button, you hit add assignments, you assign it to the customer that you just sold this Intune or this Defender package to. You do the report only, you confirm what settings they have. Once you're good to go, you do the enforced. And the beauty of it then is you just simply assign 10 policies with the click of a button. You can also click on here then and look at the status of all of these policies as they've been assigned to the customer. Have they drifted? Is everything in place as it should be, etc.? Right? So we can see that the version is valid, the sync type's automatic, everything for this customer is flowing through and flowing down as it should be. Trying to think. Sorry, I kind of pivoted last minute here, so I'm making sure I don't skip anything. Again, going to call on you, Marcus, and make sure I'm not missing anything last minute here in our last few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing here that I like to point out, like, when we're talking about these baselines and really the policies in general, right, is that desired state configuration, right? So if you've got, a person or a company is set to, keeping the latest version of a policy, right? And maybe you have an engineer that doesn't know this is set up this way, and they go into the Intune portal and they make a change. Or maybe you're doing co-managed, right? And the customer's internal IT goes and makes a change to that policy without you knowing. Because Nerdio is always looking at the configuration of that policy versus what's in the customer's tenant. If there's been a drift, that can always be set back to your desired state, right? So you have that consistency across the board. And really thinking of, how do I build this out, right? How do I, kind of what Jordan showed here is, I went and I built all my conditional access, I built out my configuration profiles. I'm going to group those things together, based on, maybe the service offering or the compliance that needs to happen. And now, with the click of a button, or in this case, if I signed any, if you look at Marcus's baseline there on Jordan's screen, it's set to all customers, right? So the only thing I really have to do is add a customer or onboard a customer into Nerdio, and that policy or that baseline is going to be applied right off the bat without you having to do anything, right? And it's in report only mode right now, but if it was enforced, right, it's going to go and create those policies for you. And I do like to call out as well that the creation of these policies here isn't actually going to start affecting any users or device groups, right? Those assignments still have to be done. But it is going to go and create those policies in the customer's tenant without you having to do that work. You got consistency. It's done the same way every time. It's lowering the amount of labor hours that you spend doing this stuff. And it's covering a wide variety of devices, right? In there, we've got a lot of different policy types that are affecting Windows 10 devices, iOS devices, doing mobile application management, right? all of that stuff. Think about the number of hours that you spend having to do that for one customer, replicated times 10 or however many customers you're managing today. It really does lower that barrier of, okay, I want to get into Intune, but I don't want to do a ton of work to get into it, right? And that's what we're looking at. And the other thing I like to point out here is, because we are short on time, the recovery services option below policy management there, this is a fairly new feature as well. One of the things that you cannot do natively with Intune right now is back up those Intune policies, right? All those configurations, all that work that you're doing. What if somebody goes and deletes something, right? Either mass deletion or one policy at a time, right? We can come in and do a full restore of all configurations, or we can look at one policy at a time, right? And we can say, oh, this particular policy was deleted on this such and such date. Let me go ahead and restore that policy, right? I can go ahead and put it back. That is another area that we like to call out. Did a great job, Jordan. Thanks for covering my portion of this and pivoting really quickly. Did we talk about the global views of these devices up here?
I did. I talked about global views kind of briefly at the beginning, kind of led me into some of the device management stuff. I didn't talk about, I guess, update rings, but you'll notice that, as we look at these global views, right, we have the devices global view, we have update rings, so you can look at your update rings that you have created across your customer base, the quality updates, the feature updates. So really anything that you can think of, you can create as a global view here, whether these are, again, physical endpoints that you want to look at, your backups of devices. Some of this is more into the Azure AVD side, but again, as it comes to endpoint management, really it's this device dashboard, Windows updates. But yeah, tons of control here. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, then I think that we can end the demo there. Obviously, there were some things that we didn't get to show, but technology is technology, and we'd love to show this to you guys on a more personal level if you want to see that. But I did want to leave a few minutes to answer some of the questions that are in the Q&A section.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Great job. So I will go over these questions really quick. We have tons of questions from the users here. So Jim is asking, NMM doesn't seem to expose a way to build policies, only to read what's already in the tenant. Is that expected? Will this be changing?
Yeah, so
I'll answer that question.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, so there is a way to build policies. It's not a great way, and what we'll typically tell you is you're going to create policies once in your Intune portal, right? Whether that's in your own MSP's tenant, or we have some partners who keep a dummy tenant that they do those policy builds out. The normal workflow as it stands right now is to build the policies in the Intune portal and then import them into Nerdio. You can build out policies, using, and I think that may be what you're pulling up. Yeah. So if you're comfortable and you know how to do this, you can use the JSON editor in here to build out those policies in Nerdio. But for most people, it's mostly an easier way is to just build it once in an Intune portal, ingest it into Nerdio, and then reassign it from there.
Awesome. Another question from Jim. For centralized policies that are multi-tenant, where are those to be built?
Yeah, and that's kind of, answered sort of in the first question, right? You can choose, right? And the other thing I like to point out is if you've already got policies that are in a customer's tenant that you've already done those policies for, you can import those policies as well. So not just from your own MSP's tenant, but you can look inside your customer's tenant, and maybe it's work that you've already done, or maybe it's a new customer that you've just onboarded and you go and you look and there's some policies that you want to bring in. You can do that as well.
I have another question. Do you support the Microsoft GCC High version?
So GCC High is not currently supported in Nerdio Manager for MSP. currently right now in the enterprise product, but it is coming soon this year. So that is going to be coming, just not currently.
Okay, we have a question from Sean here. How do you handle mixed license environments where some end users have business premium E3, E5, while others are at basic business basic standard or even exchange online licenses?
So from a couple perspectives here. So one, from a Nerdio billing perspective, Nerdio is going to look at the customer tenant, and you will get what we consider an Intune user. Intune only user is any user who has an Intune enabled license. So none of those people that currently are on Exchange Online Plan 1 or Business Standard, right? But in order to do that device management or even conditional access policies and things like that, you have to have a license SKU that entitles them to those things. So that's why most MSPs are sticking with Business Premium, because you get that Entra ID Plan 1, you get Intune, you get Defender. It's kind of all baked in there. So that's where we'll see a lot of MSP standardize.
Okay, another question from Sean. Do you do testing and vetting of updates to ensure a bad patch doesn't go out of that to the MSP?
So the update rings are handled by Microsoft. So those are vetted on their end first, and they're pushed out, on Patch Tuesdays. Now, what I will say is that a lot of our partners will build, and that's sort of the concept of update rings, right? So I can have my my test update ring, right, that goes out right after Patch Tuesday, and maybe it goes to one set of users that, or maybe, not as won't get as angry with a service interruption, or maybe I have a couple of PCs that are on a workbench somewhere, right? And then I can have update ring 2, which is, okay, this goes out to the second group of people or the third group of people, and you can have that go in waves, and you can build it out as much as you want to. So that gives you time, right? If I deploy directly on Patch Tuesday to one set of devices, and now I wait a week later for it to go to everybody else, it gives me a little bit of time to vet out anything that may cause issues as part of that Patch Tuesday.
Have time for just one more question. I promise the rest of you guys who have asked questions will follow back up via email, but we have a question from Grant. Do we still need an agent such as Screen Connect for both foreground and backstage user support?
That is a great question. So for most of the things that Intune is doing, the answer is no, right? All of those device configurations and policies and things like that are all agentless. It's all done, over the web. But for things like remote access and, backstaging and, working with an end user, yeah. So, either today you're probably using your RMM agent for that, but so later this year, maybe in I don't know if it's going to be in Q3, Nerdio is going to be adding, this is in private preview right now, but we are adding that remote access capability into the Nerdio platform. And that is something that you can have or not have. It's totally up to you, because that will be the first piece that is going to be required an agent. And that is not really, a device management capability reason why, more for those things that you're talking about, like, hey, I need to work with my user, get connected to the machine, or maybe I do want to do those backstaging capabilities and, run registry editor in the background without interrupting my user.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Like I said, if there are any questions unanswered, we will follow up personally via email to get those questions answered for you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, and we hope that you join us on the next one. Thank you so much.